You got the distribution call, you got the placement, you did everything right. And somewhere between the purchase order and the shelf, something went sideways. Your product isn't there, or it's there, but it's wrong. Or nobody can tell you either way. Every CPG brand hits this wall. Most of them hit it more than once. I'm Jordan Karcher, founder and CEO of Eileen. Know Thy Shelf is a show for founders and CPG superstars who are done taking anyone's word for what's happening at the shelf. Real stories, real data, one question underneath all of it. Your product is listed as in stock. Is it though? Hannah, it's great to have you here today. Your journey with Q Mixers is a fascinating case study in adapting a brand across different channels. To get started, can we talk a bit about your background and how you first got into CPG world in the first place? What was it like, and then how did you end up at Q Mixers?
Yeah, it's a very untraditional path to where I'm sitting today. I started in the industry. I started in the food and beverage industry. So I did every job from starting making milkshakes 4 hours a weekend as a high schooler to managing and operating regional restaurants and bars. From there, I actually got handpicked, basically, to basically apply for a job as a on-premise sales rep. And I told these two guys, now my very good friends, I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what sales is. I manage restaurants, I manage bars, I do those things. And I ended up doing it, applying for the job, looking into it. And about a month later, I was on the streets of Oakland just hand selling liquor. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the sales world.
Were you on the distributor side to start? Was that the first role?
Yep. I started with Young's Market Company, Rest and
Okay.
Bees. And then I was with them up until their merger with RNDC.
Okay. So you came from the restaurant world, which is very different than the distributor world, and then
Yes.
made your way to the supplier world, or did you change industries entirely?
I did not. I actually, part of the leaving RNDC merger with Young's Market, I was actually in the COVID layoffs. So I had gotten my foot in the door. I had been doing really well. I loved it. I got to meet and see so many different styles of business, different ways of selling, different products to sell, where they fit, where they didn't fit. And I was laid off, and it actually opened up the door for supplier. The funniest part of that is I had actually been looking at Q Mixers at that time. And when I finally got my furlough layoff notice, I had reached out to our founder, Jordan, on the Q Mixers email and said, hey, I know you have a role available or open if you're hiring for it, since everything was on freeze. I would love to talk to you, or, I've been selling your product the past 2 years. How can we make this work? And, job was frozen. So I ended up getting a role. It was really hard, actually. It was very challenging to get into the supplier side because my length of employment through distribution had been so short. Not that it wasn't unsuccessful. It was just, going straight on premise. I had no chain background. I had no off premise background. A lot of companies were like, you don't qualify. Beer companies, I did wine everywhere. I looked everywhere. And I finally landed a role with a brand called Sovereign Brands. And they were like on fire for COVID. Stimulus checks were going out, people were spending. It was a really good company to learn off premise. And they took a chance on me and they said, if you know on premise, you can probably learn off premise. It seems like you just like to learn how to do things and then you do. So,
Amazing. And what were some of the brands in that portfolio, or the lead brand?
yeah, their lead brands was Luke Belair, Sparkling Rosé, Bubbles.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a big one. And from that point, you probably learned a bit more about off-prem, and obviously, restaurant is very different than retail. But what were some of the similarities and some of the differences you noticed really early on from that transition?
Sales. I mean, sales is a intense. I always laugh. I always say I'm not the best salesperson. I'm a good human connector. I listen. I like to hear what you will do. I love to hear what you won't do. These are all like really good data points for me because I'm not going to go into an independent liquor store and sell them a high-end French champagne. It's not going to move. Or they might not know it. They might not know what they're sitting on as a customer going into that store. The account might, the buyer might, but they know what they know and they know what will move. So I think that's the most similarity I think between the two is how you interact with the buyer.
Yeah, still people. At the end of the day, you're talking to
Mhm.
people, and so you're growing up with Luc Belaire and some of the brands in that world, and then Q Mixers comes across the table. What was that appeal that had you thinking about Q Mixers, and how did you end up formally working with the brand?
Yes. I mean, I was selling Q mixers at Young's Market. and I loved working with the brand. I loved the people representing the brands. They took me out. They helped me, answered the calls. It's also a non-alc, so it has a little bit more leeway versus working traditionally in alcohol and laws and red tape everywhere.
All
So
right.
that was very appealing. It felt more versatile. It felt really collaborative and friendly, approachable, I would say. It's kind of like, well, it's just ginger beer or it's just mixer, but it actually is a staple in the pantry, a staple in the well. It's a glue that kind of glues different brands together. You can do activations. There's just a lot. It's almost a free for all, which is kind of scary because it can turn into the wild wild west. But it's just a really fun category.
And it's somewhat concentrated, I think, surprisingly. There are big competitors, but there aren't a lot of competitors.
Now so more, I think it's coming, but I wouldn't say they're marketing so mixer. Like we've always been this premium mixer that goes with alcohol. We lean now towards like being more inclusive with the trends being not drinking as much mocktails, coffee cocktails. But our roots were we were the bartender's choice. And we really, we just hit our 20-year milestone, Jordan, which I was like, wow, that's so cool.
This is it's
Yeah.
been in my mind for a long time, but I didn't realize 20 years already. Crazy.
20 years. And like, 20 years ago, Jordan was hand selling cases of tonic in New York
Yeah.
where we started and hand delivering them. And it was like one case at a time. And now we have accounts going through 10 plus cases at a time. So I forget the question, but yeah, the growth of the 20 years of that. And then just to be a part of watching it and the trends changing and what it means to be today and who's consuming that today, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, and so you kind of touch on it. It started being very heavily focused in on-prem as a brand, and I think in our first discussion, you mentioned there's a big shift to off-prem, and that's been a big focus. What has that transition been like for the brand, and obviously for you as you've been part of it?
Yeah, so I started with, well, back it up. I actually, when I was still at Sovereign Brands, the alert that they were hiring a Northern California area manager for Q Mixers popped up, and I instantly said, this is my job. I want this job. So I called all my people. How do I get this job? Do you know somebody I could talk to? I know I can do this job. So once I landed there, I did on premise and independent retail for about a year and a half. And then a role had opened up in the natural grocery channel. And they again said, you should do this. And I said, what? I've never, I actually, the CEO at the time called me and he said, have you ever thought about going more CPG, more retail? I think it'd be really good for your career, your development, and it's a really good place to learn. And we have on our general market side, we dabble with some retail accounts, but it was nothing like this. So I said, okay, like I always do, let's try this. And so I started running the natural grocery channel for our retail team for about 14 months. And that's where I would say my true dive into the CPG world, like Expo West, Trade, Unify, all of these partners I had known about, but I didn't exactly understand the layers within that. And I mean, our retail team, these are people with like 10 plus years on me of learning and like meeting people, networking. And it honestly felt like day one back at Young's Market Company where I'm asking all the dumb questions. I love dumb questions, but I start asking and learning and then peeling what works, what doesn't work, and whatnot. So it was. I still say today, 14 months of being fully dived into retail. Man, I just scratched the surface of it. It's an animal.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, starting in natural opens you up to chain, but then you have mass. There's so many different types of retail once you start peeling back those layers. And obviously the different distribution networks, since you probably came up through the wine and spirits world, now you're dealing with conglomerates, UNFI, KE. What were some of those like early day experiences like when you made that transition from being more of a like a bev alc centric brands to more grocery CPG focused?
Yeah. I mean, the ways of working, it's a completely different process, systems. There's different acronyms, OIs to all of the verbiage. We did a lot with liquor. We did a lot of scans, like, oh, okay, what scans are we running this month and what does the calendar look like? But it was very much more our liquor distributor who also has a different buyer than who I'm dealing with now in this newer set, this new world. Those things were all the biggest challenges for me because I just didn't know. I didn't like I like knocked on the front door and I said, "Hi, it's my first day here. What do you do?" And asking a lot of questions. And honestly, leaned on my broker in the beginning at first because they just really taught me the very basics of each account works this way. Just give me the basics so cuz I could make a plan. I know the product. That's what saved me in learning the CPG world is I'd already had 3 years of selling, 3+ years, including Young's Market, of selling the product. So I was very confident there, but it was putting the decks together, finding data, learning spins deeper. A lot of the technical things that you wouldn't necessarily hopping over from my perspective would just know right off the bat after selling liquor. There's also a lot more ways of promotion, ways of marketing, different programs that I found out that these big chains would do that liquor doesn't necessarily participate in because whether they can or cannot, whether it's legal or not. But that was also something that made my brain kind of zoom a lot because I was like, you can do that? Well, and it goes back to, I think, again, going from indie to on to chain, I learned to ask the chains or the accounts, what is more valuable? What is the most important thing to you? Because I think what I learned, especially with natural, there's thousands of accounts and everyone thinks something else is more important to them. And so I could sit in this chair, spinning my national brain in areas I've never even been to and try to come up with a plan that they probably would be like, why would I want to do that? So it turned into a lot of, again, the same thing, just making the connection with human beings and saying, hey, what will work for you? Like, this is a partnership. I want to grow with you and I want to learn how that would work for you.
And so let's talk maybe a little bit about the differences between a KE and a breakthrough or RNDC at the time. What were some of the, I guess, the pros and cons of working with a food distributor in terms of execution? Were they better? Did they ship less frequently? Do they manage stores more or less efficiently? What did you notice that someone who doesn't get to work with both never sees?
I think it depends on the account, to be honest, and their relationship. But what I did see, I think a lot of places will go for with a KE or unified because cost, right? They take the items, they drop them at your store, and then you do well with what that looks like on your shelf. There's no merchandising, there's no building displays or shipper, so and then when you go to the distributor with RNDC, I mean, you had accounts that sometimes their relationships with their merchandisers were better than their relationships with their reps. And that's because they're in there every day. They're pulling product forward every day. They're saying, "Hey, bud, you're out of stock of this today." So they're actually like your backup sales support that a lot of the retail, like the KE side of things, they might be priced lower, but you're not getting that extra service. And I think that's kind of missed a lot.
Interesting. And how did you handle that? So when you're working through the KE and you are accustomed to someone a little bit more hands-on, and now you're probably even further distance from the shelf than before, how did Q mixers tackle those types of challenges, which would be like, in my world, we call them data gaps or visibility gaps?
Honestly, we did the best we can. We as a team, we're small and nimble compared to like a competitor. We're probably, oh man, we are a strong but mighty team. Our retail team, when I first started, we were filling some roles, but our full team is 5 people. Some of our competitors have, I don't know, like double, triple the size of that. So our bandwidth was not able to go check stores all the time. But as a full company, we have people all over the states and we really help each other out by if we walk a store, we take pictures and then we can take those as data to say, why is the shelf missing ginger beer? Or what are you discoing something and we didn't know this? And then we can go back to either the broker or even the account and say, hey, we noticed this. What's going on? Is there anything we can do? And it's step by step. There's so many, so many doors. You can't get into all of them.
And I'm going to say, you at Q Mixers, that just knowing off the top of my head how prevalent you are, must be 10,000 plus doors at this point, maybe more.
Some point. Doors wise, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
You have a pretty wide presence. Yeah, it's impossible to cover even with a good sales team, and there's no level of human capital you can have internally to do that, so
No, we always joke we need to clone ourselves. We need a couple more of each other.
a lot more. And now with the brand, having grown and matured in retail, what do you see as some of the trends in your category? Because non-alc has become so big over the last 5 years, and you're kind of positioned right in that sweet spot of, hey, you could grab a ginger beer and mix it with just about anything and have a great drink, and you can have a club soda with just about anything and have a great drink. How has that impacted your, I guess, perspective of where the brand fits into the category now that things have evolved into being more of a everyday occurrence?
Yeah, it's interesting because we when I started at back at Young's, is when I really remember the mocktail, like, non-alc movement saying, "This is huge, this is," and it didn't feel like it had totally clicked there yet. It was a little bit premature. Through now, mocktails are just so much more thought about it, and they're more on more menus these days, which has actually been helping, I think, the drinking trends. Unfortunately and fortunately, I'm one of those, like, there's 2 sides of every story, but I remember I stopped drinking for, like, a couple months, 4 or 5, could've been 6 months, and I just remember it was such a good learning experience because every time I walk into somewhere, if there was no menu that was approachable with no alcohol, the chances of somebody or me wanting to order alcohol was higher. So the ability that now things are on menu and there's a lot more mocktail recipes out there. We share a lot of recipes to help people at home also make mocktails. I think that's really shifted just by the education and knowing that you don't have to totally have a drink and you can make a drink that isn't just like a soda. There's always this like, you're not drinking, have a soda. Well, you can still make fun, innovative beverages or recipes and still feel included. And then the other thing I would say is we've been learning a lot more about the cocktail, or sorry, we've been learning a lot more about the coffee recipes.
Okay.
So we ended up landing we did a good partnership with Pete's Coffee, and they did started doing, like, coffee cocktails, espresso and tonics, which has been around, but it was harder to find, whereas now I walk into a coffee shop, and majority of them actually serve espresso and tonic. And they did a lot of research and development on, like, different coffee drinks using our grapefruit, using matcha, tea, coffee. It's in a whole 'nother world. It's like, and if the ironic thing about that, I think, is I talk to a lot of bartenders or owners, operators, and on-premise, and a lot of their history of where they started came from coffee and starting at a coffee shop. So I just think it's a really cool full circle of, like, a lot of these guys who've been making coffee drinks when they started are now making alcohol or drink mocktail drinks, but now it's all coming back to that midday moment of how do we get bodies into accounts, or even during your day you don't want to mix a drink, but how do you mix something that picks you back up?
Yeah, I
So
agree.
we're
And with that kind of behavioral change at the bar scene, which I'm a longtime fan of. We loved Ethiopian coffee and tonic. I think they've always been it's the perfect pair of acidity and floral notes and light and bright, but with the tonic, the right tonic in particular, makes it delicious. So I've always been a big fan of that drink. But how have you seen that behavior transition into the retail space? And have you noticed buyers talking about that being more of this is now a an ingredient as much as a bev alc complement, or do you see them still thinking of this very much like someone needs gin and tonic, someone's going to need whiskey soda? Like, how are the buyers thinking about this category?
I think it's still ever changing. I think people are very I don't know if I should say this, but I think people are still a little bit confused on where we belong, because we can be a soda, we can be a mixer, and all of these have different buyers too, right? So if you're buying the same thing, but you're in different sections and there's so many different purposes, I think it can be confusing. And I think that's why we really try to share recipes or lean into QR codes that go to, did you know this tonic can make coffee drinks? And a lot of education from our marketing team of how to use and what to do with those. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of retail buyers who are placing us next to coffee.
Yeah, and so even with that, it's actually a really good point. Are you placed at times like ginger beer, it's a soda, but also very often placed in mixers? And when you're presenting, your team's presenting, do you find yourself being pushed into the soda discussion or the mixers, or where, like, where is your ideal placement? And How does that differentiate when it comes to talking with buyers or pitching Q to a store?
Yeah. Again, the mixer part is really, like I said, it's the wild, wild west. Don't think I've always said this. There's no rhyme, no reason. Our price point can fit depending on how it's sold in. We are premium, but I mean, it's rare to see us more than $8
Yeah.
out there, and that would be high, right? Depending on how you buy, but we're affordable and approachable, I would say, to many different it just depends on what you wanna spend your money on. Being 20 years in of this company, I think that this are it's a hard question because there's been so many different chapters of our life that where we've been can be in the soda section. Typically, if we go through the KeHE Unify route, we're in the soda section. If we go through the liquor distribution, we tend to be in the mixer section. And again, it's mostly because of the buyer. And that's also something we've been really trying to lean in and learn more on. Does it matter where in the store we're placed? Are people looking? In my experience, getting people to go to any mixer section and like look for a specific mixer brand is there's low. It's a high volume category with very low awareness, I would say, no matter what. I ask people all the time, what ginger beer do you use? Half the time they have to look at it or see it. People go into that aisle and they say, oh, I want a gin and tonic. I need to pick up tonic. Then they look at the shelf and they say, what tonic is there? Most people who have known about Q or have had it, they'll gravitate towards it. Then you have the other brands that, and especially a demographic age generationally, there's some brands that people be like, I've always had this one, whether it's mainstream or premium. They're like, that's the one I get. That's the one I want. Or people will just kind of look for a deal because it is a staple. They're like, oh, well, it's tonic. There is a lot more education, I think, that could be said to go into what makes the tonics different, what makes the ginger beers different. But it's also a really tough seminar to market, tastings, demoing, when you're sharing like wine tasting, that's one thing. When you're doing a ginger beer tasting, not a lot of people are so running through the door or buying a ticket for that, but it's needed. And when you actually show the potential of what these items can do for you and how to do it at home or out, then that's when people go, oh, I want that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic in that you could be in the soda section, which is typically higher foot traffic, higher volume, probably more exploratory, unless you're like I'm loyal to Diet Coke and that's all I
Yeah.
drink. More broadly speaking, exploratory. But then you also have a much more captive audience if you're a mixer. Because I think of like, yeah, I always have club soda in the house. I always have tonic. I always have things or ingredients in my mind that are ready to make a cocktail. And so you almost have a more engaged consumer with the use case, but it's also a smaller base. So it's really interesting to think about how Q positions itself on the shelf. And when you're talking to a buyer or your team's getting a new placement, if you could dictate where it was and how it was displayed in merchandising, what's the perfect scenario for you? Is it the entire Q family in one section? Is it splitting it up where you have some in soda? So like how does it work in a perfect world?
In my perfect world, we would have both sections and we would have our staple items and then secondary exploratory flavors. Towards the back end of when I was doing natural, I was playing with this idea of, okay, we need the set core. We need club soda, tonic, ginger beer, and then ginger ale. Those are the staples. But we also needed something that was fun and exciting. So we would either throw like maybe one facing of hibiscus, maybe tropical ginger beer. We have the flavors. We have elderflower tonic. Those are the kind of things that in how I was thinking about it at the time. And again, I'm no expert. I scratched the surface of the retail channel, but in my head, I was like, well, if there's a flavor on the shelf set there's none else of, and somebody likes that flavor, that's how they're going to learn about Q. They might not know about our core enough to be like, oh, I'll gravitate towards that. But the next time they come in and if they liked that flavor, they'll say, oh, I tried that flavor of Q. There are other flavors I didn't know about. And now I'm a consumer. I don't know if that works, but
Q simmer is a good one. I like it.
consumer. Yeah. So that's in my head, I was like, that's the struggle, right?
Yeah, no, that's I think it's a really fair dynamic. We see it a lot when we talk to non-alcohol brands as well. They have the same issue of you could theoretically be in the cold box with beer and RTDs. You could be in the soda section. You could be in an alcohol section or adjacent. You could be in your own separate non. And a lot of times you don't even know where to direct customers to find you. If someone reaches out to your team and says, "Hey, I love your products. where can I find it in such and such store in Los Angeles? I walked in, I couldn't see it. That's something we see all the time where it's just like, we don't know where we are. The
Well,
buyer
and every store is built differently, right? So even if you're like, well, in this Trader Joe's, it's typically in aisle 4. Well, that aisle 4 is in a different place than the other aisle 4, you know? And so that's really tricky. And also back to, well, we have people who mix with it alcohol. We have people who don't mix it. We have people who drink it on its own. Those people are going to different aisles too. So how do you, I guess my question to the world is how do you only have it in one space if you're selling to do two different consumers?
It's a tough one. It's a tough challenge, and I think it's something most brands you kind of pick pick your niche and go with it, right? You say
Yeah,
it's gonna be the one. The alternative, though, is also how well can it be managed? So if you're getting mixed in with sodas, like, are you getting faced over constantly? Is it a more competitive section where someone's gonna take over if you're not in there regularly? And so when you think of that part where you're picking up distribution, you're running through KE, you're running through distributors, which of the pathways requires more of your team's attention just to manage execution?
think all of I think it's again, it's like a account by account because even you walk into one retailer, if I'm in the soda section on the very bottom of the aisle in the corner, I'd rather be in the mixer section, face first or second to whoever is the other leading, or maybe we're the leading mixer. It depends and it varies, but it's a little greedy, right? Because you're like, then there's me though too, where I go to a retailer, I'm like, I can't demand you to make eight like feet and feet of space for me in two different sections. So for me, I think we've done it where, okay, well, maybe we're in the soda section, but we can do an end cap or a shipper next to the mixer section. And how do we lean into what they offer as like support and how to be in both?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the special placement's always really a great way to kind of avoid that specific where do we get placed scenario. With your experience, I mean, obviously starting in the restaurant world, distributor, coming through CPG, and now being on mixers previously in Bevo, if someone's coming to you today and they're starting a brand, I'm sure in the Bay Area you have a lot of these friends that are coming to you from the bar world that are starting brands. Before they go out and get their first placement, what is something that you wish you knew or you wish you could tell them before they really start the whole retail journey?
Yeah. One thing that I mean, fortunately, I got my degree in graphic design with emphasis in marketing. And so when I went to school for that, I never thought I was going to use it. And now I use it every day as a form of, I think, your assets, your sales assets, your branding, your story, your tone, and who do you want to service? I think narrowing down that, it's like any initial brand. If you bat too far and too wide, you're going to lose the focus. And building needs foundation. And I think a lot of brands that I see and I like friends have worked with, and I get the call, can you help me with this PowerPoint or this sell sheet or whatever? And I'm like, okay, do you have high res images? I don't know where those are. Do you have the barcodes? You have a UPC. Did you know that a UPC is on the unit, the case, and the pallet? There's all these UPCs for one item. I think organizing your assets and keeping that clean and building that foundation to start, especially in the beginning, before you add on different SKUs and different formats and shapes and sizes, whatever you do, I think that is the most tedious and the least shown. But as
Yeah.
soon as you have all those things and you build a one page, I think one of the big things I learned throughout my whole career is too much. No one needs a 15-page deck. No one has time for a 15-page deck unless we're already established and you're doing a review. But my biggest challenge when I build sell sheets or sales decks or whatever is how do I do this in 10 minutes or less and get an answer within 5 after? And maybe the answer is I want to keep talking about it, but I want you to have enough of the information that you can ask questions, formulate questions, come back to me, have a conversation, and see how this can really truly work out for us. Because it's an us thing. It's not me shoving things at you to like deal with. This is like the beginning of our partnership. This is how we're going to excel together. If I can't even organize that on one page, what I'm asking for them, they're probably going to say no.
Yeah,
That's what I
that's a great point. I do think it's definitely a partnership. It takes a lot of people, a lot of bodies. and a lot of work to exceed and succeed in retail. And Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. It was great to hear about your journey and what you're seeing and some of the challenges and opportunities you've encountered in the process. So thank you so much again for your time today. And anyone listening, if you've heard anything that sounds familiar, getting visibility issues, trying to find out what's happening in store, not having 10,000 people to check 10,000 doors, come visit us at shopwitheileen.com, sign up for a free demo, and we'll have your first audits up and running same day. So thank you. And as always, know thy shelf.